Bob, I'm real honored that you are allowing me to conduct this interview.
Well, I appreciate it.
Tell me about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I'm from West Tennessee. My family for 3 generations was from Jackson, Tennessee, which is just a little bit north and east of Memphis. We moved to Puerto Rico when I was 8 years old and spent 4 years there, and then moved back. Then moved to Atlanta and then to Dallas in 1962. And I started 9th grade here in Dallas and been here ever since, except for going off to school.
Brothers, sisters?
Got an older sister who lives in Atlanta, a younger sister who lives in Austin.
Okay. Kids?
Got 2 boys. I've got a 31-year-old boy who lives in Austin and a 24-year-old boy who lives in Dallas.
What do they do?
My older boy has a recording studio and has a master's in production engineering, sound engineering, and produces music. And my younger boy is going to college, trying to get his education, get everything straight.
At 24, so he's on a 6-year plan?
He may be on a little more than that.
All right. So, where'd you go to college?
Went to Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas.
And then, then law school where?
University of Houston.
Okay, and why'd you go back to Dallas?
Well, I came back to Dallas because it was home.
Right.
I had a job opportunity in Houston when I got out of University of Houston, and I just didn't care to do that.
What was it?
It was at Baker Botts, and I wanted to be a trial lawyer, so I came up here and begged Henry Wade to hire me.
You were a prosecutor.
I was a prosecutor for 4.5 years, and I loved every day of it.
When did you go to the DA's office here?
April of '73.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough to get a job with Henry Wade and worked there for 4.5 years, actually almost 4.5 years. I joined Burleson, Pate, and Gibson as a partner in August of 1977.
Phil Burleson.
Phil Burleson.
What was your most, I know you got married at some point in all of this.
Got married in 1971, after
Okay.
the summer after my first year of law school.
Okay. What was prosecuting like under Henry Wade?
It was a treat. It was an absolute treat. It was a wonderful experience. He was a wonderful gentleman and a very brilliant, brilliant man.
Tell me about Henry Wade.
Well, he lived in the neighborhood where I lived and was raised in my family. He had several children, 2 of whom are lawyers and are really fine, fine people. One of whom was just recently defeated as a criminal district judge. A wonderful guy, Hank Wade. Or Henry Wade Jr.
Right.
But Henry was a legend. He was a gentleman. He was he came across as a country bumpkin, but he was #1 in his class at University of Texas Law School.
Because I remember when I first came to Texas, and people talking about Henry Wade, how he just controlled juries in Dallas County, and how prosecutors just in Dallas County had it easy because Henry Wade, all the work Henry did, promoting the work of the district attorney's office.
Well, he was a legend. He was a great, great gentleman and a legend. He had started his career at the FBI.
Okay.
And was DA here for 35 years. Just probably the most powerful politically in this north central Texas region.
Yeah, that's what they said. What was your most memorable case as a prosecutor?
Oh, I don't know. I had a lot of fun. I had Frank Jackson and Ron Goranson on the other side of a case where a businessman was accused of aggravated sexual assault of a young lady. And the reason that I bring this one up, Stan, is because it was a hard-fought trial. He had
Right.
an ironclad alibi that had to do with a computer that he was logged on to.
Right.
And we discovered during the trial that the alibi wasn't all that ironclad because it was not real time. So
Right.
and anyway, but the substance of this is we convicted him, and he got 25 years in penitentiary, and we got an extraneous on him, and we convicted him on the extraneous also. And he contacted me after he was paroled. I haven't even spoken to Ron Goranson about this yet, but it's
Really?
the most remarkable thing. He got paroled. He got into another computer-related business, grew it, sold it for a lot of money.
Right.
And he lives in Seattle now, and we have been communicating on the email, and he's a remarkable guy. And it's a turnaround situation that really is a heartwarming situation.
So this is something that happened 30 years ago.
Happened 30 years ago. Happened 1975.
All right, it's over 30 years ago.
Yeah, 75. And he, it was a bizarre set of facts.
Right.
And for me to be communicating with him, and he's turned his life around. He's had another family and another business and everything, and it's kind of interesting. I can't wait to talk to Frank Jackson and Ron Goranson about
What did it feel like for him to contact you, and all of a sudden get an email from this guy that you prosecuted, got a 25-year prison sentence, and he's now off of paper, and he is a lifetime registration that you put away? What does it feel like to all of a sudden have this guy reach out to you?
Well, it was really unusual. I didn't know how to take it at first.
Right.
My office is the guy does interesting things. He and his wife make truffles.
Right.
Chocolate.
Chocolate truffles?
Yeah. And so he sent me some. And people in my office said, "Don't eat them." And so I had someone else eat them first.
Right.
And they didn't.
Secretary.
That's right. That's right. But it was
Clerks.
really very interesting. The guy's intellectually a really gifted guy. And he just made some terrible errors.
How long has he been out now?
I don't really remember. I don't know how long he spent.
Right.
But it was a substantial amount of time.
Wow. Did he ask you about representing him to get him off of registration?
No, he didn't. He is going to try to get a pardon.
Mm-hmm.
And he has asked me for a letter about that, and I've written him a letter about that. Don't know if that'll ever come to fruition or not, but it was an interesting thing.
I don't know what would happen with Perry today, and
Don't know. I don't think it would happen to Perry.
right. Well,
But maybe Kay Bailey Hutchinson.
if that happens.
I think it's going to happen.
So 1976, 77, you went to work with Phil Burleson?
In August of '77, I had a case. I had several cases with Phil when I was a prosecutor, and we had become friends. And Phil said, "When you're ready to leave the DA's office, give me a call." He was in Amarillo trying the Cullen Davis case when I decided to leave the DA's office in August of '77.
Was that Cullen 1?
Cullen 1.
Was that the hung jury?
Well, there were hung juries, but this one was the case that resulted in the acquittal in Amarillo.
All right. When did they try the one in Houston?
You know, I think they had tried to try this one in Houston, but had a hung jury. And
Yeah.
then they changed it to Amarillo, as I recall.
Because I watched Haynes in that trial.
Yes, Haynes was brilliant.
Yeah.
The brilliant thing about Phil, who became my best friend and mentor, was that he knew what his place was in the trial.
Right.
He knew to let Mike Gibson and Steve Sumner and Racehorse Haynes carry the water. He was the one who made he made the lists of things to do. And every morning he would have a list of 35 or 40 things for everyone to do. And there would be a gold nugget in there every single time. So he knew his role in a trial. He, of course, and Racehorse had been very, very, very close friends for many years.
Right.
And he's the one who caused Cullen to hire Racehorse to be lead counsel in the trial. Yes.
Were you involved in that, or you?
No, I was not. I was not. The beautiful thing for me was, Stan, that while they were off in this high-profile case, I joined the office as a partner there in Dallas on Bryan Street.
Right.
And the phone was ringing off the wall, and no one was there to answer it but me.
Right.
And so it was a beautiful situation. Jack Martin was on board with us at the time, too.
Right.
And so Phil was just a marvelous person. And
He passed away when?
several years ago. I was with Phil from August of '77 until the summer of '92.
Okay.
And then I started my own little thing, but we remained friends until his death.
Right.
And matter of fact, when I went to work with Phil, he said there are two things you've got to do. The very first thing you've got to do, Bob, is you've got to join TCDLA and become very active. He was the third president. He was one of the founders of it,
right,
as you know.
Right.
And the other thing is you've got to work with the state bar, the Dallas Bar Association, and become very active in those two things. That's what Phil had done.
Why did he tell you why you had to do that?
Well, he was passionate about TCDLA, absolutely passionate about TCDLA. And as you'll recall, Stan, back in '77, TCDLA was a itty-bitty organization where we passed the hat.
And wrote the checks and
wrote the checks and passed the hat and funded things out of our hip pockets.
That's right.
And he was passionate about TCDLA and wanted me to be, and I became very passionate.
Well, back in '77, '78, what was the first thing you did?
First thing that I did?
For TCDLA?
Well, I joined, and I recall the first trip we ever took was to Cancun. And Jerry Goldstein and Chris Goldstein was there, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for me to meet everybody.
Right.
The people who really made the difference in criminal defense work around the state of Texas. Those were the people who had joined together to make TCDLA, to make TCDLA what it has become today.
As your practice was growing here in Dallas, and you mentioned Mike Gibson. Who was he?
Mike had been in the DA's office before I got there. He's a little bit ahead of me, and
Right.
Mike had joined Phil a couple of years, well, I guess 5 or 6 years before I did.
Right.
Mike's a marvelous trial lawyer, a wonderful person, a great guy, and I enjoyed being partners with him for all those years.
And Steve Sumner?
Steve Sumner and I had gone to high school together.
Really?
Steve was 2 years older than I, but I knew him very well in high school because he was a star athlete.
Right.
And his wife was 1 year older than I, 1 year younger than he, and she is a marvelous woman, a sweetheart.
I know Steve Sumner represented Barbara Piotrowski against the city of Houston.
Yes, yes, yes. Steve is a good guy. He's a very strong-willed, great guy.
I represented Richard Mintz.
Yes, that's right.
Small world in the practice of law.
It is.
So as you moved into the '80s with Phil, a little excitement. How did your practice grow?
Phil had a structure in that office that was really conducive to each person growing his or her own practice. We never did share income. We had a referral system.
Right.
And we shared expenses.
Right.
So I was just very fortunate to be at that place at that time, and just very fortunate to have joined TCDLA. Most of my practice, of course, came through TCDLA. And most
Really?
of
How
the
come?
growth.
How?
People like you referring me business in the
Okay.
Dallas area. People like Jerry Goldstein, Racehorse Haynes, people that, we're kind of a brotherhood, sisterhood situation, and we know who we want to refer our friends and people that we know who might need some criminal defense work. We know who to send them to through our organization. So
Right.
it is. I've been very fortunate that it has done okay.
Who are some of the lawyers that you've enjoyed trying cases with?
Racehorse Haynes was my legal ethics professor at the University of Houston.
Okay.
I have enjoyed watching him. I loved him as a professor, and I have enjoyed him personally and professionally all these years. I just think he's a marvelous guy. He can do everything that we're taught don't try to do, but he can get away with it.
Have you ever tried something with Haynes?
Yes.
Well, which case was that?
Oh, I don't remember. It had to do with there was a situation where we had co-defendants in a civil matter, in a federal matter, against the city of Plano Police Department.
Right.
For coercing false confessions from juveniles, and had to do with the...
I can imagine Haynes saying, coercing false confession.
Exactly, exactly. And of course, we got the cases, we won the cases, and then brought a civil action. It was a criminal case, and then we brought a civil action. It was juvenile cases.
Right.
And brought a federal civil action against the city of Plano and prevailed.
And you collected?
Yeah.
Wow. So you tried cases with Haynes. You tried cases with. I know you tried cases with Ron Goranson.
Yes, I've tried a lot of cases with Ron and Richard Anderson, and
Right.
those are just the most marvelous people and the greatest lawyers.
Goranson tells a story about trying a case with you in front of Porter, Judge Porter, and you had a case that, on a jury charge that you trying to get the judge to give this jury charge. He didn't want to give it, and you just kept poking him because you wanted to argue. That's the issue you wanted to argue. Can you tell us about that case?
That's been a long time ago. Bob Porter was a wonderful judge. He's a great guy to try a case before, and he was the kind of person who would listen to reason and wouldn't necessarily agree, but we were persistent in that case. We tried it hard, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, but Ron says, you know, he had his error, and the judge wasn't going to give the charge. You just kept poking him. Come on.
Well, Ron's got a lot more sense than I do. He understood what the preservation of that error was all about, but I wanted the damn charge and didn't get it. And at any rate, we thought we had won that case on appeal. We argued it in the Fifth Circuit. We came away thinking that it was a slam dunk deal.
Right.
And they asked all the right questions. They did all the right things this panel did
Right.
in the Fifth Circuit. And Kim Wade was the appellate lawyer on that, Henry Wade's son, one of his sons.
Right.
And Kim came away from that argument just convinced that we were going to prevail. And a few weeks later, in a one-sentence opinion, we were poured out.
Right. At least they waited 3 or 4 weeks to give you that one sentence opinion.
We were in good shape for a few weeks.
It wasn't because I've had cases where I've gotten that same opinion. Beat
you home.
Beat me back.
I've had that happen too.
Did you have something to do with the Banditos up here?
Yes, back in '88. There were several wonderful people. This was wonderful. There were 16, I think, defendants that went to trial in Judge Buckmeyer's court.
Right.
And Kent Schaefer, Richard Anderson, Barry Sorrells, Ron Goranson, John Hanna. We just had a group of wonderful people, and it was a great trial.
John became a federal judge.
John became a federal judge, that's right, and he was a treat. He was a hoot. This was a fun case, Stan. We were in trial for about a month.
Yeah.
And the Marshal Service was scared to death. You know, here we've got a T-shaped counsel table, and they had place cards. Here is where this lawyer sat, and behind him would be his client, and so forth, for 16 people around, I believe it's 16. These banditos looked scary. The Marshal Service had teardrops here and all kinds of stuff.
On your eyes?
Yeah, and most of them were on bond.
Right.
The Marshal Service had a marshal for every single defendant, standing behind each defendant. And it was just, the security was so incredibly tight, it was unbelievable. By the end of the first week, Judge Buckmeyer was on a first-name basis with every single defendant. And Buckmeyer convinced the Marshal Service to back off. And they did. And it was a remarkable case. We had a wonderful trial. Most everybody got convicted. This is pre-guidelines.
Right.
The judge was extremely fair with everyone. And we learned a big lesson about that. And that is, these national officers of the Banditos organization were, by and large, veterans of the Vietnam War.
Right.
Who didn't want to or couldn't reassimilate to society. And they were gentlemen. They had their own ways, but as far as loyalty and being gentlemen, they were perfect gentlemen. I lived on a cul-de-sac in Lakewood, at the very end of the cul-de-sac. At the end of this trial, we had a buffet dinner for all the banditos, their lawyers, their wives, at my house. And the neighborhood was looking at what was parked in front of my house, kind of unusual.
Yeah.
But my wife said at the time, she said, well, what about the silver? What about the crystal? What about? And I said, there won't be a problem.
Right.
There wasn't a problem. There wasn't a piece of silver missing. As a matter of fact, no one left until everything was clean.
Right.
It was just, those were good people. It's just interesting. That was a wonderful trial.
Well, that was a different type of a client.
Very different. Very different.
There was extreme loyalty.
Very, and they all, as far as I know that my client was the National Secretary Treasurer. He was a Marine, a very decorated Marine in Vietnam. Those people recognized that they received a fair trial.
Mm-hmm.
They recognized what they were on trial for, and they accepted it, and they went and they did their time, and I'm sure they're all out by now, but they're just, it was a very fun situation to have so many of my brothers in that trial together.
That's a very special type of bonding goes on.
It was a career setting experience, Dan.
What was it like? Richard Kent was the president of TCDLA.
Yes.
Richard was the president of TCDLA. Ron was the president of TCDLA.
Bill Wishkemper.
He was in the trial.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
So you had 5 people. Back in '88, you weren't on the officers' chain yet, were you?
No.
Kent was, I think.
I think Kent might have been. I think each of us was either on the officer's chain or a director.
Right. So what was it like, for...
It was just wonderful. It was just wonderful. To watch Kent Schaefer work.
Mm.
I mean, I can say this about each of those people, but to watch the brilliance of Kent Schaefer and to be part of that was special.
I tried a murder case with Kent representing a bandito known as Crashed.
Yeah.
And we had a 25-minute not guilty verdict.
Wow.
And it was just fun.
Yeah, it is fun. It really is. It's what we worked for.
Yeah. You're talking about the camaraderie of that group. You had 5 people on the board of TCDLA, and the Banditos in the 80s. I know as your career, I'm going to come back to TCDLA in a little while. As your career unfolded, you started representing lawyers.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, one of the things that Phil Burleson told me he wanted me to do is to get involved in the state bar.
Right.
So he called his good friend, who was a member of the grievance committee, and said, would you take Bob as a member of your subcommittee? And I was so lucky that I was accepted as a subcommittee member, and the rules were totally different back then, Stan. Then after very little time, that particular member of the grievance committee was appointed to be a criminal district judge to fulfill an unexpired term, and therefore not qualified, or he had to get off so he appointed me, or he had the state bar director appoint me to take over as the committee member.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough to serve on the grievance committee for 8 years until my operation of law I had to spin off. And then I would be called from time to time by lawyers who had grievances, and it's grown to the point that about 60% of my practice is representing lawyers, and doctors, and judges in disciplinary and licensing things.
Really?
Yeah. And it's really a great niche. I enjoy it immensely.
How is that different than representing the citizen accused?
Well, it's not. I mean, he is a citizen, or she is a citizen accused also, but instead of being a criminal thing, it's a licensing professional career thing, and it gets it gets our attention.
Right.
It really does get our attention. And it's a fun thing, Stan, to sit across the table from a brother or a sister in the bar who has got a problem with the grievance committee. And it's not, I shouldn't say with the grievance committee, because it's seldom a problem with the grievance committee. It's a problem that has to do with someone who has brought a grievance.
Right.
And it's really a very rewarding experience to work with another lawyer to try to undo what has got to be the problem.
Oftentimes, do you find that it's a communication issue?
Very often. very often. And I'll tell you, Stan, one of the things that makes it such a rewarding and pleasurable thing to represent lawyers in disciplinary actions is our Office of Chief Disciplinary Counsel, the investigators, the Assistant Chief Disciplinary Counsel. Those are really wonderful people. They're hardworking, they've got a good heart, and they're honest, and it's a wonderful situation to go into that kind of relationship. We're able to work out most of these cases and able to prevail in almost all of them.
Right.
But it's a fun thing. Betty Blackwell is now the president, or she's the chair of the Commission for Lawyer Discipline.
Right.
Now, it used to be under the old rules that the Commission for Lawyer Discipline was kind of a honorary thing. Now it's hard work.
Right.
Now it's really hard work. Thank God for Betty, because she's turned that commission into a hard-working group. And because she is so brilliant with criminal defense work, now we've got a commission that understands what we do.
Right.
So when a grievance comes down there, and the commission is now the client of the Office of Chief Disciplinary Counsel, and with Betty on board, and Ron Bunch has just now joined that, we've got some people there that understand the criminal practice of law.
I did spend 6 years on a grievance committee.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Well, didn't you think it was rewarding?
Yes, I ended up being the chair of the committee instead of having a one-year term as the chair. The committee voted me the chair for 4 straight years.
Well, that's just fantastic.
I really enjoyed it. I was doing that about the time I got really involved in TCDLA.
Great.
So this transformation in your practice started probably in the early 90s?
I think that's probably right, because it was 78 and 8 is 16, 86, in the late 80s.
All right.
In the late 80s.
Your involvement with TCDLA as a member, to a board member, as a speaker, tell me about how that evolved.
As I had said, Phil Burleson is the one who urged me to get involved in TCDLA the minute I left the DA's office. And he wanted me to become active. I got in there with Richard Anderson, Ron Goranson, and just some wonderful people who got me active in it. It got me on subcommittees. And so it just kind of evolved that way. And, you know, I'm going to interview Ron this afternoon, and one of the things I want to develop with him is how he and I raised our families through TCDLA.
Tell me about that.
Well, our vacations consisted of going on TCDLA trips with our children. Our kids grew up in TCDLA. It's just amazing. It was a real bonding experience, not just for my wife and for me, but for my kids.
What was it like for your wife to be going on trips? My wife went on her first TCDLA trip this past summer after 31 years.
Well, she just loved it. You know, she was involved heavily with Friends of TCDLA,
right,
with all those wonderful people who have made such a difference with our organization, particularly during a period of time when we were financially in trouble,
right,
and just kind of fledgling. She enjoyed it a lot. She really had a lot of responsibility with Terry Goranson and with Rita Evans and Laquita. You know, they had a lot of fun together, and they made a lot of difference. We just grew up with the organization, and it was a fun experience. We went on all the trips.
So you had 4 or 5 families that would travel with their kids and as couples?
Yeah, you bet.
And when you weren't with TCDLA, did the 5 of you or 6 of you or 10 of you couples became socialized together, so your social life became TCDLA?
It did. It really did. And for many years, there was a core group of us that would go, the guys would go skiing the first or second week of January every year up to Colorado. A lot of, Richard had a condo, and Bill Bratton had a condo, and Steve Sumner had a condo, and then all of them around Vail.
Right.
And so we'd go up there every January for many, many years with Ron Goranson, of course, was the den mother. He was the one that kept us all in shape and all day.
He's the one that kept you all sober.
Well, I can't go that far, but he pretty much, Rusty Duncan went with us.
Oh, geez.
Oh, golly bum. We had some just some fantastic stories about Rusty.
Tell me, Rusty. I met Rusty in '78, and we became friends a long time ago. I remember the first Rusty Duncan seminar, and he and I became. But tell me about Rusty.
Well, Rusty was a lawyer's lawyer. He was the most intense person I have ever seen at everything that he did. I saw him one time, and he had his shoulder in a harness, medical harness, and he had a big patch over his head. And I said, "Rusty, what happened?" And he said, "Well, I had an accident playing racquetball."
I remember that.
Well, what he did was he charged the front wall so hard that he crashed into it, dislocated his shoulder, and slashed a gash in his head. We were at Squaw Valley skiing one time, and we had stopped for lunch mid-mountain. Rusty had 2 or 3 cocktails with his lunch, and after the lunch we left, and we got on the ski lift, and we're going down a black diamond, and all of a sudden Rusty just goes kabam. And I've never seen anybody fall as violently as he fell, but he was attacking the mountain after lunch. But here's something, Stan, that I'd never seen before. His skis came off, but they didn't stop because the boots were still in the skis.
His shoes?
The boots went with the skis to the bottom of the mountain. And Rusty is about semi-conscious in a pile of snow in the middle of this thing, and somebody, I think Tim, went down to the bottom of the mountain and got his skis with the boots still in them, and got on the lift and came back and then skied down to where we were trying to help Rusty. And what had happened was he had forgotten to rebuckle his skis after lunch. And so when he made a cut, he went down and the skis came off with the boots still in them. I mean, that's how intense he was. He was he was a brilliant guy. He had a degree in English. He was teaching at what's the name of the university in Austin?
St. Edwards.
St. Edwards. He was a literature professor at St. Edwards. So to go and spend a few days with him at Tim Evans' condo at Lion's Head at Vail, in the evening he would read and he would pontificate. And it was all very interesting. I've got a photograph in my office of Rusty in his pajamas. He had a pair of Guernsey pajamas, looked like a cow. And he's pontificating like this, and Tim Evans is standing there looking at him at his watch. He said, "Isn't it time for you to shut up?" And he was just, one time we were walking in Mid-Vale in the evening. We'd been, had dinner and a few cocktails.
A few cocktails. Just a few.
And Rusty had a top hat. We were walking in the snow, and Rusty would come to a perfect stranger and say, "Sing any song, second verse, any song." And he had people that he didn't know walking in Mid-Vale singing crazy-ass songs. And that was the way he was. He was just, he never met a stranger.
Never met a stranger.
Never met a stranger.
I remember Rusty, there was a woman who's now a district court judge in Fort Worth.
County
court judge in Fort Worth.
And that delightful.
I just remember meeting her at the seminar, the dance course in San Antonio at the Plaza Hotel, and Rusty pointed her out and said, "She's mine."
Well, they were a couple for a long time. She's just I try cases in her court all the time. She's just wonderful.
And it was I think he met her at one of the first Rusty Duncans.
Before she was a judge. She was a criminal defense lawyer.
Right.
Yeah.
But Rusty was just crazy.
Yeah, he was a great Sherry Hill.
Right.
I just love her. She's just wonderful.
When he went on the court, we used to spend Tuesdays at the night before arguments. He and Marvin used to come over to the chili parlor.
Oh, wow.
Spent a lot of time pontificating, preparing for arguments.
He was a lot of fun. That was such a tragedy to lose, Rusty.
It seems that you had a bond. You have a bond with some of the greatest lawyers in the history of the state.
I really do. And that's just something for which I am extremely fortunate, appreciative.
You know, that you trying cases with Richard Anderson and Tim Evans, and what's Tim like to try a case with?
Well, Tim, there's nobody like Tim. Tim is sharp times 10. He is a human genius. He knows how to present the case. He knows how to pick a jury. He understands the human side of these things and just is amazing, absolutely amazing. I mean, I jump at the chance to try anything with Tim. I knew Tim when he was a prosecutor.
Right.
And he was a wonderful prosecutor. He was a head and shoulders above the rest. He was just, his credo is honesty, perfect intellectual honesty. And he just knows how to get a jury to understand what he wants the jury to understand. The judges love him. Everybody loves him. He can try a case and win it and not upset the prosecutor. And it's just amazing.
That's a real skill.
It's a real skill, and he's got it. And his son's got it.
So
Lance didn't fall far from the tree.
So you've tried cases with Tim. You've tried cases with Mark Daniels, probably.
Oh, yes. Mark and I have tried some things together that have to do with a combination of TCDLA, of state bar things. You know, Mark represents a lot of lawyers in criminal actions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very fortunate that he'll send me the state bar side of
right.
it. And, you know, Mark just had a victory that is just indescribable.
Tell me about it.
Oh, well, Mark and Tim Moore in his office.
Right.
Great, great lawyers. They were appointed to represent a cop killer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a death penalty case. There was no way to have mitigation in this case. There was no way to have sympathy for this guy. And Mark and Tim got that jury to give this guy life instead of death. I just couldn't believe it. And the article that I read about it in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram was just incredible.
Tell me about...
I, as a matter of fact, went on a ski trip one time as Mark's wife.
Excuse me?
Debbie
Right.
had a season pass for the mountain,
Right.
Vail Beaver Creek, and Mark got it from her and gave it to me, so I didn't have to pay
Right.
the lift ticket deal. So for about 4 days, I was skiing as Debbie Daniel. It didn't go any further than that.
Did anyone call you on that?
No.
So if we called you Debbie,
Well, it's fortunate that they didn't look at the thing to see that I'm supposed to be a 5'10" beautiful blonde female.
Height may be close.
That's where it ends.
So TCDLA played a real role in your personal life,
Yes.
your social life,
Yes.
your development as a lawyer,
Absolutely.
and your development as a person.
Absolutely. I mean, Richard and Ron are the ones and Phil Burleson are the ones who are that I thank so much for getting me involved and making me become very involved. It's meant the world to me. These are the best friends I've got. You, Stan. The best friends I've got in life are the people that I've met in TCDLA.
How did that come about? What does TCDLA mean to you?
Well, before I go to trial, every single time, I look in the mirror and I say, I want to be as good as I can be today, because I'm no better than what I am able to achieve today for my client. And I look at you, and I look at Ron, I look at Richard, and I look at all those other members of TCDLA who are dedicated and are passionate about what we do. And it's just, it makes sense to me. It makes everything work for me to be around you guys and gals. And it makes the profession mean something to me.
How do we convey that passion that you have to the next generation of lawyers?
Well, I think we're doing it by coming to these seminars and by board meetings and by urging the young members to come to the board meetings, by urging the young lawyers who haven't joined TCDLA to do so. And I think, the way that you and I may have been able to develop our passion through Scrappy and Weldon and all those wonderful giants.
I had Marvin, I remember Marvin Teague in my first Capital.
Marvin.
I called him up one night at 8 o'clock at night saying I have a jury charge problem. He and I worked on the phone for an hour, and at 7 o'clock in the morning I met him in the coffee shop.
Yeah.
And he was with me.
Yeah.
Working with me. He didn't know who I was, but it was a capital case and I needed help.
Well, I dare to say that civil lawyers don't have that kind of camaraderie and support.
Right.
They don't. I was involved in a civil case yesterday representing a lawyer in a sanctions hearing. It's just a foreign thing to me. I've spoken at a lot of civil lawyers seminars, and they don't have fun. They don't bond.
Right.
They don't have the camaraderie. And I guess maybe it's because they're dealing with money issues and we're dealing with human issues.
A federal judge in Houston, Lee Rosenthal, she came to a dinner of the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association, and she came up to me after the dinner and said, criminal lawyers are having a whole lot more fun than civil lawyers.
So very true. So very true. So very true. Right out of law school, I had an opportunity to be a civil lawyer.
Right.
And it was for a lot more money than to go to the DA's office and learn how to try a criminal case. But just didn't like it. I went through the orientation. I thought, I'm going to duke somebody out at one of these goddamn cocktail parties.
Yeah.
And I'll be carrying somebody's briefcase for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you become a halfway decent criminal defense lawyer? Well, one of the ways is to go into the DA's office and learn how to try a case. And so that's what I enjoyed doing.
Did you think that, I know for me, one of the people that really changed what I did was Cap Bennett.
Oh, yes.
In the mid-'80s.
Yes.
And things just kind of evolved, so everything I'm doing is different than I did 30 years ago.
Sure.
What about you? You mentioned Phil Burleson as bringing you in, but as a criminal defense lawyer, who are the people that really changed what you do and changed you and how you do things?
Oh, goodness. There's so many. Weldon Holcomb.
Tell me about Weldon.
Well, I've known Weldon since I was a puppy prosecutor.
Right.
I was assigned in April 1973 to Judge Ben Ellis,
right,
County Criminal Court number 1. And Weldon would come into town periodically, and he would always come to Ben Ellis and say, let's go to lunch, let's take the prosecutors. And we called him the Candy Man, of course, because he always had a pocket full of candy to hand around. We'd get in what he termed his East Texas pickup, which was a new Cadillac always.
Right.
He'd take us to some fancy restaurant and feed us. And I got to know him as a prosecutor. And this afternoon I'm going to say something about something that happened one time when I was a prosecutor with Weldon. It just kind of typifies the kind of gentleman and lawyer that he was.
Right.
But people like Scrappy, Bob Jones, those people that put their arms around me when I was a puppy, and still do.
Mm-hmm.
And that has meant so much to me. Henry Wade meant so much to me, and R.T. Scales.
Who's R.T. Scales?
R.T. Scales was a criminal district judge. I was assigned to his court for 2 years. He meant a lot to me. He was a wonderful, wonderful man, and a great judge. And you know, there's people along the way like that. Richard Mays.
Mm-hmm.
When I started the DA's office, Richard was in the DA's office.
Right.
He was running the grand jury, and then became a judge, as you know.
Right.
Was the best judge that courthouse has ever seen, or will ever see, in my judgment. He's meant the world to me. And just Buckmeyer, what a gentleman, what a brilliant guy, what a sense of humor. Trying something in his court is just a treat. It's a pleasure.
If you had one thing to say, one message to send to TCDLA, what would it be?
Keep Joseph around. Keep Joseph and Bertha, and just stay as dedicated to what we're about. Keep these seminars going the way that they're going. Educate. Just keep doing it the way that you're doing it, Joseph, and all the people around. And it's just, I guess that's what I would say. I would say thank you, because it's made the world of difference to me.
Now, if you want to say something to your sons.
Well,
one's 31, one's 24.
Yes.
And I know I've heard you talk about your son in Austin often.
Yes. Yes.
Here you are, what, approaching 60?
I'll be 60 in March.
Approaching 60. Been a lawyer now for 37 years?
Well, about 34.
34.
Well, let's see. April of 73.
Three. So you're coming up on
35?
35 years?
Something like that.
A whole lot of time.
A whole lot of time.
And yeah, 60. As you approach your 60th birthday, what message do you want to send to your sons?
I want to send a message to my older boy that I'm so proud of him. He's living a passion. He's living a passion in his business and is hoping to be successful with it, and I know that he will be. And to my younger son, I want to tell him that he can find himself and he can achieve what he wants to achieve if he'll just focus. My older boy's got a passion, and he will stop at nothing to achieve. My younger boy needs a passion to try to achieve. So I would say that to them. I love them both. They're my world.
Bob, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stan. I appreciate it.